Well, welcome everybody. My name is Michael Monaco. I am the community general manager of wow, our hometown newsprint, and this is our hometown podcast, powered by ServPro. Our guest today for our very first episode is the magnificent Mayor Mary Casillas Salas. Before we get started, I do want to do a big shout out to ServPro Chula Vista, who is our major sponsor. So let me tell you just briefly a little bit about them. They have served over 10,000 people in Chula Vista. They are available for service 24/7, and they are owned and operated by the Guire family, and that's Martine and Albert Aguilera family. And they are a community-oriented, family-owned business. So if you have a need for a cleanup, fire protection service, board up, and remodel, it's ServPro Chula Vista. So we're gonna get started right away with this very casual conversation with our two-term mayor, who I kindly know as Mayor Mary. Can we call you Mayor Mary?
Absolutely.
So one thing I will say about Mayor Mary is she is an extremely approachable person. I think a lifetime Chula Vistan, and your family goes back generations. So I think it's only fitting that you would be our mayor at some point in your life. You've got a very unique career in politics. You not only have been the mayor, but you've also worked on the state's stage before. And then, of course, you were also within our city council, I believe, right? So now that her time is coming to an end, as she finishes her second term, I want to take time to share some of the great things that Chula Vista has accomplished over the last 8 years under her leadership. So I'm going to introduce a topic, and I'm just going to let her run with it because she is a wealth of information. So let's talk about the first time I saw you on the diocese as the new mayor of Chula Vista. And the first order of business was to find your replacement on city council for seat 3. Is that correct?
That's correct. And it wasn't an easy thing to do.
No, I mean, it was, well, there was a lot of people who wanted that position. And there was, of course, already early on some politicking. But walk me through a little bit of what that first council meeting was like for you.
Well, it was pretty challenging. First of all, even though I had been on the council for many years and had experience being on the dais, I wasn't mayor. And so I wasn't in charge of running the meeting, right? And so having to navigate the whole process of an appointment to the city council would have been difficult for anyone, okay? Plus, really, when you're talking about an appointment, it's not the will of the people, it's really the will of 4 people on the dais making that decision. And 4 people, you've got to have a majority vote, so you've got to have at least 3 people that agree. So that you're starting off with difficulty already, right? Because people have friends, they have political connections, and they want to get their buddies on the council. But really, the most responsible thing to do is to get the most prepared, the most ethical, and the most committed person to the city of Chula Vista to get on the dais.
I remember that. I remember sitting there in the audience, and I was actually sitting next to Steve Meisen when his name was presented. And I remember it became very contentious, and it was just one vote after another of stalemate, stalemate, stalemate. No one moving forward. 2 here, 2 here, 2 here. And it kind of ended that way for the first city council meeting, if my memory serves me correctly.
That's correct. And we were running against a deadline because we had a certain amount of time to appoint somebody before it triggered a special election. And at that point, the city finances were in really bad shape. And so what I didn't want to do is have a special election that would cost several $100,000 to the people of Chula Vista. So I really felt strongly that we needed to make a choice. And even if it was a compromise, we had to get to that point where at least 3 of us agreed on it.
I remember going to the second city council meeting, and Steve Meisen was there. And I know Steve Meisen. He's a fellow Rotarian. He's been a friend. For a matter of fact, my wife and I almost bought his house when he moved. And And it was interesting how all of a sudden he was the first city council meeting, he wasn't even a contender. And then all of a sudden he's back and all of a sudden he starts to look better. And I remember you putting your foot down midway through that second city council meeting. And you said, I'm going to do what I believe is best for the city. I'm going to break this tie and I am voting for Steve Meissen.
Mhm.
And at that point, I realized there's a very smart woman. There is a leader. And I did not have this friendship I have with you now. It developed over the last 8 years as we got to know each other. When I saw that, it was so refreshing that to see a leader say, it's not politics, it's right for our community. And I'm going to do what's right for our community. And I'm going to make a decision. And this is how it's going to go. And it turned out to be a very good decision because
It did. Steve turned out to be an excellent city council person. And I'm so sad that he was only with us for 2 years. But I think that had he continued, had he run for reelection, he would have been voted in overwhelmingly. Just the great things that he did for the community in the short time that he was there.
So let's dive into that just for a second. I'm going to digress a little bit because you said something that has been brought to my attention. There has been this prevailing conversation from unnamed people, political influence, saying if you are appointed to a seat in the Chula Vista City Council midterm, like Steve was for your seat, that it's considered bad form to run for re-election. And it's not a policy, I understand. It's not anything in the charter or it's not written. It's just it's something understood.
Right.
Do you think Steve should have broken that unspoken agreement and run for city council?
It's hard to say, but certainly I would have supported him because in the 2 years that he was there, is that we became very close colleagues and worked jointly on some pretty tough projects. And so I really grew to respect him and admire him. And I would have supported him. He turned out to be an upstanding, right on, honest, no nonsense kind of guy. But mixed with that, he had this great personality and a great sense of humor that used to put people at ease. And that's really an asset on the city council instead of having people that are fighting amongst one another, is finding how you can find that common ground and get everyone, maybe not to agree with 100%, but to make sure that it was always cordial and that you respected the differences of opinions.
We'll move on after I make this little comment. I always thought Steve Meissen was like Chula Vista Steve Martin. He was goofy, he was fun, but he was very professional and very kind. He was our community's garbologist, and he really played that role well. He really represented Republic Services very well.
And that was a controversy, right? There were some people that did not want to appoint him because they felt that there would be a conflict of interest because there was that contractual relationship with the city. However, there's ways to handle that. And our city attorney has always been really good about pointing out anything that even has the appearance of a conflict and having the council members recuse themselves from the vote. But that was controversial that he was even an employee of Republic at the time.
See, always talking trash, aren't they? So let's kind of move on.
I just want to say something else about Steve. He made an excellent choice of council aides. So, and I'm still friends with him, and I still admire these two young men so much. And one of them is Cameron Celeste, who is now working for Summer Steffen.
Incredible
and
young man.
The other one is Jason Paggio, who is now the head of the Asian Business Council.
Right. You're right. Both young people who were at the right place at the right time, and Steve recognized their potential and gave them that opportunity. And yes, look at them today. So that is another attribute to Steve. So right after that, we started looking at certain things that had to go on the ballot again. And you mentioned that financially Chula Vista was not where it should be. And you were going to help with the sitting council change it. So the first thing you put on the ballot was Measure P. So Measure P was an infrastructure tax, and taxes are never popular. But I do remember the campaign, and I remembered how You were very informative. I think all of the council members, mayor's office, city attorney, city manager really put it out there as this is what it is. What impressed me most, and what you did in these next years that I learned taught me a lot about public government and community government. One thing with Measure P that you said that I was really impressed with is you were going to have a COC attached to this, a community oversight committee. So it wasn't, oh, thanks for the money, we'll do what we want with it. You're saying we are going to actually be accountable to a group of citizens who are going to help us figure out how to spend this money, which I understand isn't common in every place, but it's something that has become more consistent with City of Chula Vista when they pass a measure of having a COC. So let's talk about that a little bit. So it's been since what, 2015
Mhm.
that Measure P?
2016 is when
16.
we took the vote on it.
And so what has it done to date?
What has it done? Oh my gosh. I look back at that time and I look at the revenue streams the city of Chula Vista was collecting and the amount of deferred maintenance that we had in our parks and our recreation centers, in our infrastructure, roads, in the sewer system, right? The corrugated pipe middles, all of that. So we had so much that was deferred because of the financial crash of 2005 that we really never recovered from up to that point. And then just our lack of revenues coming in. So one of the things I had to explain to the people of Chula Vista and how I got the support of many people is showing that relative to revenue coming into the city of Chula Vista, we were second to the last in the county of San Diego and one of the lowest in the whole state of California that was collecting revenues per capita, right? And so, you know, if you look at other cities, right, like the city that we're in, Coronado right now, is they've got all these supplemental revenues coming in. They've got hotels that they get to keep 100% of the transit occupancy tax. At that time, Chula Vista was hotel and motel poor, right? We had very, very few of them. Sales tax revenues. So we still experience many, many people going outside of Chula Vista to shop. And so what happens? The sales tax revenues stay where they're spending their money, and it's not in Chula Vista. So people say, well, you've done all this building, you have all these houses, you have all the property taxes. But property taxes barely pay for the public services that are involved. So as many houses as you add, you need to add more parks. You need to add more police. You need to add more fire. You need to add more libraries. Where does that money come from if property taxes are barely covering their expenses, right? You've got to have those diversified revenue streams coming in.
So you're saying that typically in Chula Vista, after all is said and done with property taxes, it's a net zero.
Yes.
It's a break even.
Mm-hmm. If that.
If that. Okay. That's important to know because I've heard that argument before.
Mm-hmm.
I pay my taxes. I pay my property taxes. Well, we also have to remember that when I moved here in 2004, property was high. In 2007, properties were low. And part of Prop 13, I think it was Prop 8, there was a subtitle where you could actually have your property taxes reassessed based on the depreciation to the market, which meant the city was even getting less.
Right.
Now, you take a look at that and you say, well, we can't make the fire department and the library and the park service take a pay cut, but the city in itself with property taxes took a big pay cut.
Oh, yes.
And
so what you have to make is really tough decisions, right? Who do you lay off? So in 2005, we laid off a third of our staff. In 2005, we had 1,300 employees, which by the way, by other city standards, was a lot more fewer employees per capita. So we had to reduce that by a third. So we were down to less than 1,000. And you still have to provide the services. You still have to keep the libraries open. You still have to maintain the parks, get those lawns mowed. I mean, a whole number of things. And so we started off from, we were in a hole.
Yeah.
We definitely were in a hole. But Measure P, what that did, and thank you to the voters of Chula Vista.
64%, I believe, was
it was 68% of the voters voted for that half-cent sales tax. But I think that we were able to tell a good story about what the taxes would do for them,
Mhm.
and it's turned out to be true. And the other part of that was establishing that citizens oversight committee that would make sure that every single cent that we were spending was was true to the expenditure plan that the voters voted on, that
Yep.
we wouldn't go outside of that.
That's important. I mean, a lot of people always will come up with their own conspiracy theories, thinking it's
Mhm.
just a money grab, and that well, it's gonna help fund pay raises and
Yeah.
stuff. I've always learned to appreciate that because now we're going to jump into Measure A. So
Mhm.
not too far after Measure P and its success and its measurable success, and people were actually starting to see
Mhm.
a difference in their community. We had to address another concern, which was I remember having this conversation with Chief Bejarano. I saw him one day at a lunch meeting, and he, very professional guy, but you could see he was carrying a weight. And in conversation, that weight was he had to sit down and he had to thin out the police department.
Mhm.
And that is not something anybody would ever want to do, and especially in our city, to know that we have less officers
Mhm.
on the street. But he,
Especially when the city continues to grow.
yeah. But even at that point, we were still in the top 3 safest cities, but
Mhm.
doing that, you're right, it's uneven now. Cities growing, protection's decreasing, but they still did an incredible job. So here comes Measure A. Talk about that.
Yeah, so Measure A was specifically to hire public safety staff and the administration that it would take to, if you had 3 new fire stations and you're adding battalion chiefs, and then so your administration has to grow along with that. You have to make sure it's not top heavy,
Right.
and Chula Vista is not top heavy on our administration level by any means. I would say that we're one of the least bureaucratic cities in all of California. But it was specifically to address public safety needs through hiring staff. Measure P took care of getting the equipment for them, and some of Measure A as well. But basically, that was to hire staff. So when we started that campaign to raise money to hire more police officers and related staff and firefighters that we would need for continued growth, is that we were dead last in the police department, dead last in the ratio of officers per the community members, dead last of all the state of California.
The closest city to Chula Vista was Irvine,
Right.
and Irvine had a higher crime rate.
They did, and if you think about Irvine, they're a new city, totally new, relative to Chula Vista, and uh, they're brand new, right? And they're all shiny, and so they necessarily didn't have that need for the police officers, right? That we did, but again, the voters voted to tax themselves in order to provide those services. So today, we're able to add 90 new police officers, plus community service officers, plus the dispatchers that they need, right? And our fire department has expanded 2 brand new fire stations, but in addition to that, rebuilding 2 more fire stations, getting everyone the state of the art equipment that they really need to perform their jobs well. So the money has gone to good use. There's another thing that people contact our office about a lot, and they say we need a substation in the east side of Chula Vista. We need a substation to keep ourselves safe. Um, I don't agree with that, and the reason I don't is that when you're thinking about building a substation in another facility, first of all, it's going to cost you millions to build the substation. Second of all, it's going to cost you about $1.5 million just in administration fees just to keep it going. So wouldn't you rather use that money to hire more officers, which by the way, don't sit in a substation.
Right.
They don't sit in a substation. They are patrolling all the time. And so I know a lot of people think it might add to the safety, but it doesn't. And um, I wish they would get that perspective and understand. Would you rather have more officers or a shiny building that you have to hire janitors for, and you have to keep the windows clean, and you have to pay for the electricity?
Deferred maintenance.
Mhm. Yeah. So,
And we're still 30 officers short.
yes, we are. And it's not for us not wanting to recruit, it's because of the environment now, especially what we saw shortly after COVID.
Mhm.
People went nutso, right? And there was a lot of civil unrest, and there was a lot of rhetoric about defund the police, and police were all bad and that kind of stuff. And so there was a large segment of the population that turned negative against the police department and police officers. And so, would you like to go into an environment like that? Where you put your lives on the line every single day, and to have people automatically judge you that you're a bad cop?
Guilty by association. I
Yes.
did notice in Chula Vista, we had limited rhetoric as far as, yes, there were some people, but when I looked the way that Chief Kennedy and her staff handled it,
Mhm.
when I looked at the problems we had in the community, a few protests out in Chula Vista Park by East Lake High School. I think what really bothered me was I saw that it was managed well by our public safety. I was not happy with the way Target barricaded their doors. I remember I went to Target. I felt safe enough in my community to go to Target to buy something, and I go to Target and they have stacked up their shopping carts like a barricade to the front door.
Right.
And I was so insulted by that. I actually communicated Target and voiced my concern, said, you obviously don't know this community that we live in. You underestimate our law enforcement, but you also underestimate that we as a community can peacefully, in the most part, protest something. But of all the shops in that, and that was on the corner of East Lake, I guess East Lake Parkway, where Island Burgers and that area is, Lowe's, that they were the only store that actually barricaded themselves. It sent a very negative message, and I was very mad at them for not acknowledging the community they serve in such a almost scared, paranoia way. It was not a good representation.
Well,
But
okay, so they did that, but let's make sure the public knows we had zero vandalism.
that's right.
We had zero property destruction. We had peaceful demonstrations where people exercised their right to free speech. Um, and we had the ugly signs, out there, but again, that's part of free speech. But we didn't have any destruction, but we were well prepared for it. So our police department was well prepared to respond if that happened in our community, like it did in La Mesa, or like
Right.
it did in some other communities in the city of San Diego, and all through the United States for that matter. But our police department and the relationship that we had with our community is what really saved us from that.
And they've built that relationship over years too.
Over years.
Coffee with cops and everything
Mhm.
else, the sock and shoe drive, a very engaged police department. And I've always been proud of our police
Mhm.
department. And I think they're still doing a spectacular job. So on that, let's talk quickly about safest cities. Historically, over the last 2 decades, Chula Vista has been in the top 3
Mhm.
safest cities. It's kind of ironic that all 3 cities are C's: Coronado, Carlsbad, Chula Vista. But most recently, Chula Vista has been ranked number 1
Yes.
safest city with still the smallest police department per capita. When I first moved here, there was a thought process that I never subscribed to, and I'm not even going to say what it is because you know what I'm talking about. There's something about 8 and not anything good south of it. I don't believe that. I believe that Chula Vista is an incredible city, always has been and always will, and it'll only get better. But there's always going to be haters out there, right? So back into safe cities. Now let's jump into something a little bit more personal. At the Policeman's Foundation Gala, I learned you have a nickname. And I thought it was so appropriate. Why didn't I think of this first? Because people like to identify, or they would say, they use words, people will say, oh, they're very charismatic or they're very protective, but I really love what Chief Kennedy called you. May I say it?
Yes.
So Chief Kennedy passionately and respectfully refers to Mary Mary as Mama Bear. And I love it because you are a mama bear when it comes to public safety and protecting public safety and ensuring that our public safety has what they need. You really do act like a mama bear. And we all know if you're out in the wilderness, you never cross between a bear and its cub. So you never cross between mama bear and her public safety, right?
Right. And, the reason is that, the rhetoric that was involved in other communities, right? And sometimes within members of our own community. And, really kind of disrespecting our police officers. And, I will challenge anyone, any chance that I get, if they're misinformed about our police and the activities. We have a very transparent police department. If you look at the dashboard, on their website, we have information relative to, every drone deployment that we have, every incident, where they occur. So Chief Kennedy, David Bejarano before that, starting with Chief Emerson, it was all about transparent policing and community policing. And I think that's why we are so successful in being a safe city. Yes, we have our problems. We have youngsters that are unsupervised that vandalize, break car windows, that type of thing.
Stealing catalytic converters.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's the kids. I think that's
No.
it. That's
Organized crime.
Yeah.
We're going to actually have Chief Kennedy on in the near future. We're trying to schedule that.
Right.
And we're going to let her do a deep dive like we are here with how effective and professional and actually cutting edge our Chula Vista Police Department is. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that because there's some incredible information. And it's going to be a myth buster because what you think you know about our police department and all the rhetoric that's out there about the drones and everything else, you're going to see some pretty incredible stuff that's going to change your mind. And Chula Vista is known for a lot of things and we've been recognized. I remember back in 2010 when Forbes wrote an article about Chula Vista saying we were the most boringest city in America. And that was kind of a slap in the face to us. But do you know what the premise of that article, why we were so boring? Because our crime rate was so low. So now they're saying if your crime rate's low, you're a boring city. Okay, fine. Then we're a boring city. But how did we answer that? The Blue Bombers take the World Series.
Right.
Little League World Series. That was our answer to we're now on an international stage. So we know how to answer a challenge. We know that how our government answers challenges, how our public safety answers challenges, and now how our community and the support. We had right after that was Jessica Sanchez with America's Got Talent. Back to back, all of a sudden Chula became this great, like, what's going on in this community? And I think one of the best parts of that was a couple years ago. Remember with Amazon's HQ2, a big bid, what the city of Chula Vista did and how they proposed to Amazon was very unique. And for those of you who don't know, it was a very big coffee table book that highlighted the beautiful things about Chula Vista, because as we know, Amazon started as a bookstore distributor. And I heard that in one of the conversations on a webinar or whatever, that Jeff Bezos was actually on one of those and he asked more questions about this Chula Vista. Like, what is the city of Chula Vista? The reality was, from what I've discovered, is we actually checked every box that Amazon HQ proposal, that RFP wanted us to check. But there was one box that was not acknowledged and it was never discussed, but it was the deal breaker, and that was tax incentives. And
right. I mean, I have a real problem with tax incentives to corporations, that especially corporations like Amazon that are so rich, right? And the reality of it is, Michael, I think that we were lucky not to get them here because it wouldn't be of service to our community. As we've seen where Amazon has cited their headquarters or their corporate offices in other places, they bring along other people from other places to do that work, not necessarily your own talent that you have in the city. And you know what? I'm so glad because that property now that they were eyeing is now going to be the home of our new library and SDSU Cinematic Art School.
Exactly. That's the breaking news too. So let's now we jumped ahead to that because
And
that was
that's
one of
way better.
right.
Okay. That's way better for our community.
And that's part of the University Village concept that they've
Yes.
been float. Okay, so let's take a little deeper dive into that. So pens on paper, right? The ink is wet. It's going to happen. So that's one of the bookends to this whole project.
Mhm.
So what do you see completion of that? So let's talk a bit more about what that is, and then what's coming in behind it.
Okay. So I mean, this was such a brilliant shift of strategy that we had relative to attracting the university, because now what we did was such a win-win kind of deal. So we utilized our library funds because we need a new library, right? And so we have that. We have a $25 million budget, not budget request. We got the funding from the state of California because Assembly Member Alvarez, a brand new assembly member, which this is unheard of because usually when you're new, you don't have that much juice.
Mhm.
But he was able to convince his colleagues in the legislature to allocate $25 million to jumpstart the university. In addition to that, we had Speaker Pro Tem Tony Atkins do another $5 million. Plus, we utilized the library funds that we had been collecting to build a new library to put all of that together. And now we're going to have a new library that's dedicated to all things digital and cinema, which is what kids are really into right
Millennials,
now.
yeah.
Okay. That space is going to have sound studios, not only for production, professional productions and productions that the students can use there at the university, but also for the community to access, right? Recording studios, that type of thing. And so it's going to be a marvelous spot. And then the commitment of San Diego State to open their programming by the fall of 2025. So we'll start building in 2023. I won't be mayor anymore, but I don't care. We got the job done. And so they're going to begin offering classes that early with 50 faculty and staff members and approximately 500 students. That's the incubator to the university.
I'll close with this on this topic. Our libraries have been known to do some pretty interesting things. Early on in my career here in Chula Vista, I was actually on the Chula Vista Public Library Foundation Board. And it was that board that kind of helped with the thanks to Tim Colby at Tyran Shopping Center, that they put a library in a shopping mall. And I have to tell you, that was the first in the United States that a library went in it got so much attention. It got both local, regional, and national attention, including the library director of California coming down to see this phenomenon. That library itself in the shopping mall has grown. It's a great little community living room, as Betty Watson used to say. But they also became a passport office. And that passport office, which I personally had used to renew my passport, had become one of the most successful and finally run passport offices in the state of California.
In the United States.
In the United States.
Yes.
So our libraries, and then of course, now you look at all the cutting edge things it's done, and now you're talking about this new media center. So again, Chula Vista, not a boring city.
No,
So-
not by any means. That there's a lot more to come.
So, and we just talked about growth, and we're just going to skim through this. So we also have Third Avenue, the revitalization of Third Avenue, which you really spearheaded the microbrew. You know, I know that Jim, and I'm going to mention names and stuff out here because this is a podcast. It's not a TV show, but I will tell you the godfathers of microbrew, which is Doug Chase and Jim Shirey over at Bay Bridge, kind of went through the red tape and opened the doors for Nova Brazil, who is just becoming an international sensation.
Right.
And then we have local owner operators like Chula Vista Brewery, Three Punks. Third Avenue has become this new pub crawl microbrew scene with some good restaurants. So let's talk a little bit about not just that, but how you changed the flow of traffic in a sense, how you cleaned it up, and now it's a beautiful thoroughfare and very walkable, very safe, but also driver-friendly community.
Right. I mean, the things that are happening on Third Avenue are phenomenal. But I just have to point out Chula Vista Brewery. So Tim, Tim, why am I forgetting your name? I know your name. Tim. Anyway,
I think it's Baker, isn't it?
no. Tim, forgive me if you're listening to this. Tim Parker.
There you go.
Okay. Tim
Parker.
Yes. When I met him, because I live in downtown Chula Vista, I noticed this guy that was coming to this one empty storefront in the evening, every evening, and working on tenant improvements, like building it out. It was Tim Parker himself. He would come after his duty. He was a helicopter pilot in the Navy.
Huh.
And so he would come after work and work on this. And he was the very first one to open. No, Third Avenue Ale House was the first, but he was the first brewery
Right.
to open
On Third Avenue.
manufacturing his own beer. So he opened that. It became very successful, so successful that he moved to a second location in Eastlake. I just talked to him the other day, and I told him, Tim, in your wildest dreams, did you ever think that you would become this successful? And he said that was the goal. So he told me that now, because they're producing all this beer, he's producing like 15,000 cans a month and
Wow.
distributing them to Costco, he named a whole Trader Joe's, a whole number of things. So what we're talking about here is a small business owner that has been able to grow, add more employees, build his own family wealth, and the wealth of so many others because of that business. That's what we want to see in Chula Vista. By the way, all these businesses on Third, they're all opened by local kids. I mean, they're kids to me, right? Because I'm a little older. But all of them have this history and this background of growing up in Chula Vista and opening their businesses.
Keeping it local.
Yes.
So we talked about the housing. We talked about Amazon. We talked about University Village. So as we're coming to a little bit to a close, I want to give more time to your legacy, because we talked about this on the way over, and I want to give appropriate time to this. There is a very unique environment brewing right now in City Hall. And we're not talking political as much as we're talking about the topography of City Hall. The city of Chula Vista was incorporated and acknowledged in October of 1911. So we're 111 years old this month in October. And we had a board of trustees up until about 1952 when we elected our first mayor, which was James L. Hobble, if my memory corrects me, serves me right. But from 1952 to now, which now you're looking at 70 years, I don't think we've ever seen such transformation. So what I mean by that is right now in the city, there are 6 positions that are elected positions. You have the mayor, the 4 city council members, and the city attorney. In this election coming up on November 8th, 4 of those for certain are open and with no incumbent, which means these are seats that are open for anybody without a challenger already seated, no incumbent. And we believe that there's going to be a 5th one. There is a very strong conversation in our community thinking that Steve Padilla is going to win state senate, which means now 5 of the 6 seats are going to be coming. Now, Steve's probably going to be an appointment, so it won't go to an election, but it'll be appointed by the new city council and mayor. But in your best recollection, has this ever happened before?
Not that I ever knew. You can go back. The city clerk has this whole history of the elections in Chula Vista. I'm kind of a nerd, so I studied it. So I think way back in the early 50s, there was a recall. And the community was trying to recall 3 city council members. The recall failed, but nonetheless. But you know why they wanted to recall them? Because they had passed an ordinance forbidding that you keep horses in your backyard within city limits. That was the reason for the recall. So we've changed.
That's right. I can't park my horse in my front yard anymore.
Right.
So
But the change is going to be phenomenal, and I'm kind of worried about it because one of the reasons for the city of Chula Vista's success has been the strong and steady leadership over years. It's just not me; it's councils and mayors before me that have been very thoughtful leaders. And so, what I worry about is, this change of a whole brand new shift of people being elected that don't have that institutional memory,
right,
because it certainly helped me when I got on the council to be able to talk to people like Jerry Rinden that had been on board for a very long time, to be able to talk to, Steve Padilla or other council members that had that experience to kind of show me the ropes. Now everybody's going to be there kind of blind.
right.
And then the steadying hand of the city attorney. Glenn is leaving us, Glenn Googans.
Yeah.
We are so lucky that he was our first elected city attorney. He had served in the city attorney's office, and so he knew municipal law. Municipal law is very different than being a trial attorney or being a real estate attorney. It is so different. And the complexities of the contracts that Glenn and his staff have worked on in the past years, the Bayfront,
Right.
so
Huge.
complex.
Yeah.
Okay. Our agreement with SDSU, so many other things that are coming that I really, really hope that the new city council, whoever they may be, is dedicated to the city. It has the right motives for running.
Well, this is your legacy. I mean, you and previous mayors have worked very long hours for years and years, decades almost,
Mhm.
to move the ball forward. I want to take a moment, shameless plug, but our hometown newsprint actually published the bios of all 8 candidates, the 2 for mayor, the 2 for city attorney, 2 for District 1 and District 2. If you want to get to know who these candidates are, these bios were written by them, not by me and not by my staff. These are their own words, like it or not. But this will give you a peek into who they are, what they stand for. And then what I'd ask you to do, and I'm sure the mayor would agree, is do your homework. Get to know these candidates. Find which one you think is going to be best for Chula Vista. We're not going to tell you our choices. That's up for you to decide. But I think if there is a time to get out and vote, and if there's a time to invest in understanding the candidates in this election, the time is great now. And so please, voter turnout is going to be very important. We both agree the topography, the makeup of that diocese is going to change in 90 days. And if you want to see the city continue in where it's going and moving forward with all the completions of these projects, then you need to use your voice and your power of vote to put the people that you believe belong in office. Because I think now is where I would expect to see a very high voter turnout. I'm going to ask our Chula Vista and Annex part of Bonita community to please really dig into these candidates and really decide who you're going to back and be prepared, because this is a pivotal point in our city's history. And we need everybody needs to feel comfortable that they actually put their vote out there. So please, this is my plea, November 8th, just vote.
And make sure that you're just not relying on the candidate statement, because they're not going to tell you anything bad about themselves, right?
That's right. It's like internet dating.
Right.
So we've covered a lot, and I wish we had a lot more time. And I may bring you back after you're in office, and we're going to have some more fun. But I just hope this podcast has been helpful to you. Our hometown podcast, our goal is to kind of bring in the community stakeholders and people that really have the impact in our community, and to have a dialogue like this, to really share what is going on. Our hopes and goals in the future is to do more of these podcasts. And again, I want to thank Serpro Chula Vista, the Aguilera family, for underwriting these podcasts. I also want to thank support from Aria Cleaners and from Pizzo's Pizza, with 2 locations, Millennia and Shops at San Miguel Ranch, best pizza in town. But I want to let you know that your support, your feedback on these podcasts are important. And hopefully we will get, my goal is to get the police chief and the fire chief and other community leaders on to talk about it. And we want to hear back from you. We want to know what are some of the things that we could be talking about and addressing. But I would also like to thank our mayor, Mayor Mary, for being an incredible leader at a very important time in our city's history, in bringing back things like Bayfront, and bringing back a revitalized Third Avenue, and moving forward with and supporting and helping the Millennia Project, which we did, which is a whole nother conversation. There are so much good things going on with Chula Vista. And if you're a Chula Vista resident, I think you'd agree. If you've lived in other places, I still think Chula Vista is the best place to live. And I believe in so much, I invest in my community. And I hope you do too. So thank you so much to all our supports, to all our advertisers, and thank you again to our mayor. Any closing comments?
Yes, I just would like to acknowledge and thank Mr. Positive. So
That is her
that's-
nickname for
that
me.
is
She's
the
Mama
nickname.
Bear. I'm Mr. Positive. This is what she's called me.
I think since the second day I met you. So, Michael is a transplant to Chula Vista, but I have never met anybody with such an unabashed love for the community that he chose to live in and raise his family. And so I really appreciate all the work that you've done, Michael. I can't wait for the pumpkin smash.
Oh,
That's another invention of his.
November 5th.
Yes.
November 5th. Eastlake Middle School, 9 a.m. This is the South Bay Pumpkin Smash Game of Throws. If you've got children that just love to see pumpkins go fly through the air, we actually help kids through high school, middle school, and elementary school build a trebuchet, which is basically, if you're a Game of Thrones fan, you know what that is. That is like a catapult. And we're throwing pumpkins. But the most exciting part of the day is our opening ceremony. So right now, I'm shopping for the largest pumpkin for sale in San Diego. Last year, we acquired a 100-pound pumpkin. In partnership with the Chula Vista Fire Department from the beginning, they take that big pumpkin and they've actually built their own custom sling to the very end of those big fire trucks with the rear driver. They put that thing up there at about 110, 115 feet, and we drop that pumpkin. That is our opening ceremony. This year, in addition to the pumpkin smash, we have a fall festival. So the fall festival will be from 11 to 3. Again, Eastlake Middle School in the back lawn. And the fall festival is really going to be community leaders. We've invited the police department to come out and engage with the community, the fire department to come out. We're inviting the school district's robotics programs to come out. We're going to have food and crafts, but this is a free community event. And again, you're going to watch pumpkins fly. You're going to see kind of a medieval theme fall festival. But that is a fun event. Again, that is Saturday, November 5th. Opening ceremony is 9 a.m. at Eastlake Middle School, back lot. Please be there. So that's it for today. I'm Michael Monaco, your host for our Hometown Newsprint podcast. Thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.
Bye.